But first up, in the last few decades, stand-up comedy has cemented its spot in the mainstream. Comedians like Veer Das, Bassi, Zakir Khan, they're looked at as modern-day truth-tellers, with everyday observations woven into astute commentary and punchlines. Today on TBC, we thought we'd take a look at this funny business to understand everything from how the scene has changed over the last few decades to what tickles India in 2025.
Is it the 2009 opening of the Comedy Store in Mumbai that many comedians look at as the beginning of the business side of it all? Then there was Comic Tan on OTT, which was another game changer. Now, making stand-up comedy accessible on the click of a button, and even comedians like AIB making comedy and skits a regular YouTube phenomena.
Right. So in 2018, an IIM Ahmedabad study said that stand-up comedy as an industry was raking in about 30 crores a year. They estimated it was growing at a rate of 25%. Today, becoming a stand-up comedian is very much looked at as a legitimate career path. Everything from open mic nights to open calls dedicated to finding the funniest among us.
So what does it take really to become a stand-up comedian in India today? How profitable has it become? Should you really be pursuing, and how have the jokes we laugh evolved over the ages as well? We look at all of this with our guests this morning. Let's introduce them now. Now, to understand all of this better, we've got a comedian and actor Karthik Kumar joining us this morning. Now, Karthik is somebody who you'll remember from some Bollywood movies as well. But he's not just someone who does stand-up, he organizes the entire setup, which is so interesting. So, Karthik, when we start with you, just want to understand first, in your view, how has the stand-up comedy space sort of changed in the past decade or so?
I would definitely credit the first brigade of Veer and Papa CJ, the likes of who started very early in the 2000s, 2001, 99, 2001 types. But they were playing an art form that they knew culturally from a Western perspective. So largely their language was English, and they were largely targeting probably an extremely elite audience, which was watching probably English theater, right? I think the floodgates opened around 2009, 2010. As far as South was concerned, I think we at Avam, we started off a wave of comedy artists. In Bombay, there was a similar wave in Delhi. It's kind of around the same time all this was happening. And I think the floodgates opened when the Comedy Store set up its only second branch worldwide in Bombay. That kind of set the tone for saying, I think stand-up comedy is now an art form. We are now asking for Indian voices to come and take the mic.
Karthik, how has what works for India changed over time, over the last few decades?
I think comedy has become a paradigm of conversation right now to discuss social situations, personal situations, psychological, political situations. It's now become a language more than ever. If you were to resort to only comedy from cinema, right? Cinema comedy is largely situational, and they will make you laugh about very, very tame things, right? Whereas stand-up comedy pushes you into extreme areas of conflict, of confrontation, personal disquiet, personal traumas and discomforts, our mindsets, and what's missing in our mindset. I think comedy has gotten a lot more personal, and therefore that's why you find a lot of people taking offense to stand-up comedians, because we're hitting at very, very raw nerves, and that's a very important power that comedy holds. And I think comedy is being used much more than just entertainment right now.
All right, now staying on that subject then, Karthik, what is your view is happening in India at the moment? Do you think India will have people like Colbert, Jon Stewart, and is that how the Indian comedy really works over here, or do you think here sensitivities are very different?
Okay, so when you speak of Colbert or Jon Stewart right now, I think you're talking from a perspective of incisive political ideology being deconstructed on I think a lot of people have done that. A lot of people are doing that in stand-up. There's a lot of resistance to it. I think the forerunners for that would be a comedy group like AIB, right? So they were pushing the political and social rhetoric and deconstructing a lot of things on using comedy. So will we see a television program that will host this? I don't think television is ready for stand-up comedy at all. We're probably a few generations away from television encompassing a comedic art form that is literally pushing the envelope. It will break barriers. You can't edit comedy, right? Because comedy is, in its essence, stand-up comedy is a live art form, right? So if you are looking to censor it, if you're looking to edit it, hive out stuff, it loses its essential rawness, which is what makes it the coolest art form, right? So I think comedians are very happy today reaching out to their audiences through independent media and through live performances, right? So I don't know if you will find that when you spoke about Colbert or Stewart, you're talking about television opening its portals to that. I think television comedy will still be lame and tame. And not to say that it's not good. It's just simple and easy.
Yeah.
So, Karthik, if we could ask you, your own platform, Evam, you've been running it for about 22 years. Can you take us behind the scenes of running a platform and a channel? What are the lucrative parts and what are maybe the unlucrative parts?
I think the invisible warriors in the stand-up comedy space are people who are in between the artist and the audience. There are many invisible workers who love the art form, who know the art form well enough to be able to, I think, operate as producers, as venue owners, as managers. I somehow feel like that's the most sacrosanct and sacred space in stand-up comedy, because artists need these people to reach their audiences, and audiences need these people to find artists that they otherwise easily would not be able to find. Because when an artist literally breaks out into popularity, right, this middle person can disappear. Whereas there are a whole bunch of artists for whom this middle person, whether it's venue owners, managers, producers, are absolutely important in the ecosystem. And that's the part of the ecosystem that I feel is most fragile and I worry the most about, right? Because I think a lot of artists feel like they impurify themselves by becoming organizers, right? But actually the artists can make the best organizers because they're literally providing comforts to another artist that they would have wanted themselves. So there's a lot of empathy that they require to become venue owners or producers. But that middle ecosystem is where I think there is still a question mark over how do we make money on this. Evam has literally been in this space for the last 20 years without really fully understanding how do we make money on this. Because I don't think you can come into it saying, I want to make money. You need to come into it saying, I think what we are saying and what we're leaving behind, the emotional carbon footprint we leave behind with these pieces that we just say into the ether and it gets recorded, makes a difference to the ethos of my country in some fashion. It will document a moment in time in a way that even a documentary cannot do.
Karthik, that's real deep, but now since you're talking about being a manager and being that middleman, put on that hat and tell us, why aren't there enough women and even queer people on stage? Why don't we see that happen in India?
Two things. It's not a safe space for them. Nobody goes out to create consciously create a safe space for people of somebody who's not a cis hetero male. It's largely a cis hetero male art form right now because of the lack of safe spaces that are there to host a different person's opinion or a different opinion. The second is the slow to digest society that's saying that, wait a minute, we don't want women saying these things. We don't want the acknowledgement of other genders in society right now. It's slowly, the acceptance from society is slow, but that cannot define how slow it should be. There have to be more safe spaces created because you have to be able to create open mics today that are actually open to LGBTQI people rather than heterosexual men. right? Cis hetero men should be the last priority in certain spaces. That makes the space essentially safer. And it should be run, and these other genders have to be empowered to run these open spaces, because a city is only cosmopolitan if it can create safe spaces for different diverse people of different diverse backgrounds, different genders, different sexualities, different languages, different regions. And every cosmopolitan city has to ask the tough question, saying, hey, do I have 5 safe spaces here where people of different identities, apart from the majority, can express themselves? So I think it's the lack of safe spaces right now, and that has to change, and I hope it's changing. I'm doing my part, but I think all of us are in it together.
Karthik, tell us, does humor change from region to region in India? You're someone who's performed across the country. What have you found?
I think we were a lot more amenable to be able to change our content to reach different parts of India. All right, because India has the most number of diverse audiences. Right? If I cross 100 kilometers, I'm speaking a different language and I'm speaking a different culture in India. Right? I think it's easier for me to speak to a Tamil sitting in Australia, and a Tamil sitting in America, and a Tamil sitting in Europe, and a Tamil sitting in Africa, much easier than a North Indian sitting, a UPite sitting in Gurgaon right now. Right? So I don't even try anymore to reach out to the UPite in Gurgaon, because I don't think they're willing to, or they're excited, or they feel like I'm the person they want to listen to per se. Right? So it's literally culturally spread much more. So there are comedians who are not pan-Indian. I don't think pan-Indian comedian is a thing anymore. I think it's every country, every city has its own, every culture, every language has its own local favorites. And within that, the genres are spreading. Hey, this person in Tamil speaks about observational things. This person talks politics. This person talks serious things. So I think it's spreading from that perspective. I don't think there is any need for a pan-Indian stand-up comic per se. And that's largely maybe because of the language and cultural barrier, but I don't see it as a barrier. I see it as it's a different language altogether. I would find it extremely difficult to connect with a Bengali youth right now. Right? Because I think the lingo of that young person is completely different from the lingo of a Tamil youth right now. So I would have to understand that, and if I'm understanding it, I'm tuning myself into audiences. Whereas a stand-up comic is actually, it's a very autobiographical space. A stand-up comic should sound and talk and be like themselves as much as possible.
Interesting, but wouldn't you say like Veer Das is so pan-India at the moment? But we'll leave that for another day. But this entire segment is about the business of stand-up comedy. So let's get down to it now, Karthik. Could you tell us a bracket of how much do, say, top comedians in the country earn today?
I think right now a practicing professional stand-up comic who's constantly hustling to ensure that they have multiple revenue streams. They work with shows that they do in public, all right, where they sell tickets. Now, this is literally the least revenue and the least money-making thing unless you become famous. All right, in the absence of being famous, they're doing that. They are also providing writing services in various creative projects where comedy is an inherent requirement. This could be boring corporate documents that have to become funny, or corporate events that have to become funny, or they could be award shows that there's an entertainment segment for. So they're practicing as writers. There are also the entire corporate shows, where corporate world knocks on us saying, hey, come and do an item number and go. But we have to understand how long is that item number that we need to perform. Yeah. How do we make sure that we're politically correct? Because at the end of the day, you want the payment from the corporate. And what are the rules within the corporate? And corporates are much more strict than probably West Asian countries right now. So there are things that you can say and not say. So that's a hustle altogether. And of course, social media is a complete hustle by itself. It's literally the space where you are You have opened your dukaan and you're saying, I'm available, buy me, consume me, relate with me, and tomorrow you will in some way become a ticket buyer for me as such. But once you break out into a certain level of popularity, I think all of these other revenue streams become passive and you just focus on selling as many tickets as possible, doing what I love doing the most, which is saying what I want. So I think once that opens up, most comics literally only do live shows.
So, what do people who've been around for a few decades, people who've established themselves essentially, or even, people who've only been around for a decade but have already done it, what are they saying about the Indian comedy scene right now, the Indian stand-up comedy scene?
I definitely will tell you that I know senior comedians, including myself, we resonate with a certain complaint that we have. It says that, hey, there are no when we started off as comedians 15 years back, we were organizers as well, right? We were not performers, pure performers. We were organizers. We used to run a venue, or we used to solicit with a venue and figure how do we convert them into venues. We used to be in with the ecosystem of 30, 40 comedians that were in our city right now, right? I find today that the younger comedians are less entrepreneurial in that sense. They only want to see themselves as performers, and they don't want to see themselves in any way being a part of the organization of comedy. They're all in it for themselves. I wouldn't say that we were not in it for ourselves 15 years back, but there was a sense of a we, right? I think that sense of a we should exist, because if something happens to Kunal Kamra in Bombay, every comedian should stand up saying that should not be done. That should not happen, right? So I think we are all one voice, and maybe younger comedians don't vibe with that enough. But if they started feeling a sense of fraternity, a brethren that all of us we are, and I'm sorry I'm using such male gendered words, but if we are the same community as such, if they get that feeling and they do many rituals that remind them that we're part of a bigger commune of people, of artists, I think that would make a very, very vital contribution to just that art form becoming a much more a spreadable art form as such.
Interesting, interesting. We're talking about the newcomers versus the veterans, sort of what they can learn and not from the other. What are the traits that you can share with those young ones watching right now on how to make it big? This place has become extremely crowded now.
I think personality traits would be people who have in some way had a very average but difficult upbringing. Right? It could be a class situation, it could be a parental situation, it could be a difficult small town that they came from and they had to struggle and find a way. These are very, very valuable conversations that become content very, very soon. So people who were in difficult life circumstances, but all the while in those circumstances had the innate ability to ask, why am I going through this? What is this nonsense that I'm going through right now? Can I call the bluff on it? That instinct or curiosity to say, I want to call the bluff on this. Not that it's going to change anything, but let me ask that question, right? A person who asks those questions, in some way, what a safe social citizen would call a rabble-rouser. A safe social citizen would say, hey, this person is a renegade, is a rebel without a cause. There's no cause. If you're starting to rebel very soon, you will find yourself into comedy sooner or later. And comedy would be a very healthy outlet for your sense of rebellion. And just that question of asking why. And that person who asks why in class is the most annoying to the class teacher. Right? Or that person who wants to ask why and everybody's like, stop asking these questions. Keep quiet. Right? That person who's been shut down in class will eventually start finding an outlet, because all those hidden thoughts that they went through in their heads, which they documented, literally becomes comedy gold. So rabble rousers and rebels, here's your all social derelicts. This is the best place to be, comedy.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
very, very
it's so
fascinating.
lovely to hear someone so fired up about what they're doing. Karthik, thank you for bringing us that perspective. We thought this would be incomplete without bringing you one different perspective. We wanted to hear from someone who's trying to make it on the scene right now, trying to break out. We're going to go over next to Devashish Mulye. He's a 29-year-old stand-up comedian. Now, he started doing comedy, performing in front of audiences all the way back at the age of 20 when he was still in college. Right now, he's in Bangalore, which many actually call the hub of stand-up comedy. He's a product lead at a tech company. And for the last 2 years, Devashish, it seems you've been investing very seriously in this. So you've been going to Bombay, Gurgaon, Delhi, around the country, putting forth your stand-up comedy. So tell us, Devashish, you've actually had a reel of yours from a stand-up comedy set go viral. It's gotten that 50,000 plus views. How does that change the way you perform? Now when you're on stage, are you constantly thinking while you're giving that stand-up, okay, this could be a good moment, we should make a reel? Do you find yourself not living in the present?
Yeah, that's definitely a layer of the experience. Every time you're on stage, you're kind of mentally counting moments. Okay, that was a good moment. This was a good moment. Okay, 3 reels. So that is a part of, how the experience is set up for the comedian as well. And it's a part of the bigger, format of this career is that you're also, in a way, a content creator and you're doing the entire digital marketing, social media marketing. So you're thinking along those lines as well. I think so. Reels do change how we think, but also in exciting ways because it's nice to have like a very compact 1 minute showcase of your skill set as well.
So reels are like your portfolio. This is what you push out to the world and you take it forward. But Devashish, help me understand how difficult or easy it is to become or make it big in the stand-up space now. In a space, like I said, which is already crowded, which has some very known faces and people from all walks of life coming in with very different perspective. What does it take to really shine out?
So 2 parts. First part is actually it's quite a booming space, I would say, especially in the last 2-3 years. As everybody is now very warmed up to the idea of going to live shows. They've also, evolved their thinking from first thinking it's something you watch on YouTube to now it's something you go and experience in real life person in a comedy club or in a cafe. So way many more live shows happening in every city, even smaller towns, way more live shows. So somebody in Bangalore or Bombay could be doing 2 shows a day every day when they're starting out within a year. They would be smaller shows and you're not getting paid, but you're getting up on stage and you're building your, your voice, you're building your art, your skills and art form. So right now there is that platform to get started. And of course, there's a lot of other comedians, but because it's such a booming space, I think it is very possible to find your space if the hustle is there and if the dedication is there and love for the art form, of course, is there. So that's the first part. How do you deal with so many voices and so many people that you have to rub shoulders with? It's kind of exciting, actually. Everybody is kind of different. And like Karthik also said, India is such a heterogeneous, population that there are so many different voices and they fit in different places and different audiences. So, every niche has its own space to grow. So in a way, it's also a very nice opportunity to be unique while also being with all these other people who bring in so many different, such a different essence.
Devashish, can we ask you what the money actually is? If you don't mind telling us a little bit about, the numbers, how much one makes in a show at the level you're at, how you expect that to change, how one does financial planning when it comes to being a stand-up comedian.
Sure. So, it helps to think of it as a business, right? Or at least, you're a freelancer in a way. So there is an investment and then there is revenue. I would say that the first 2-3 years, like any business, is heavy on investment of time and even money. You're traveling, putting in your own money, etc. So I would say the first 2-3 years, maybe not that much money. Maybe you could help a senior comedian do some and get some odd gigs, but there's no money in the first 2-3 years. But after that, once you're established and present in the scene, you could do 2 shows, 3 shows a month, these corporate shows, which are like easy to grab at this point, and you could be earning about 50, 60K a month within 3 years, I think. but also the cost of it is 20K. So the economics of it are kind of tight in the first 3 years, but after that you grow, right? So if a comedian has 50K, 100K followers on Instagram, you could, instead of doing 3 shows, you could be doing 10 shows, 15 shows, and you could be earning very like corporate salaries, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs. And then after that, the sky is the limit. If you're one of the famous comedians, you could sell out stadiums, you could do NRI shows for NRIs, you could tour in Europe, US, and then there's a lot of money. Sky's the limit.
All right, Devashish, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you so much for joining us and good luck with your comedy scene. We'll check you out on the other side, yeah?
Hey, thank you